So just tell me, obviously we get updates periodically from the museum and from the FBI, but what's the latest you can tell me about the investigation?
Well, this sounds like a cliche, but it is an active and ongoing investigation, so you can't really share too many facts about what we're doing, but I can tell you without reservation that we work extremely hard every day, and by every day I mean 7 days a week, looking for these paintings. So the investigation is as robust now as it has ever been.
With the last FBI announcement, they acknowledged that they know who had some of these pieces, if not all of the pieces, at one point in time. There have been reports over the weekend in the New York Times naming these individuals. Has that changed the nature of the investigation at all?
Well, on both of those counts, let me be clear. On the first one, we announced in 2013 that we were aware who the thieves were, not necessarily who in particular was holding all of the pieces. We also announced that we believe that at least one of the pieces was brought somewhere to be sold. So that's slightly different than saying we know who had them at one time. On the second part, in the recent interview that you referred to, if you read it very closely, nobody really named anybody. The New York Times article provides conjecture based on a theory that was presented to the reporter. So again, in that interview, we didn't name the two people. Those are the two that the reporter surmised from the information.
But again, to my question, given what was announced from the FBI and the museum about knowing elements of it that we didn't know that you knew before, has that at all changed the nature of the search?
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about the fact that we are aware who took the paintings, that's a major accomplishment. But as we said at the time, and I've said it a number of times, when you get to this point in an investigation, when you're looking for something that's been going for a quarter of a century now, it's, I'll use a football analogy, it's like being in the red zone. You march down the field all the way to the opponent's, basically their goal line, driving that ball home, as the Seahawks found out in the Super Bowl, is where it gets even more difficult. And that's how I feel where we are now. I believe that we're at that point, but the hard work remains to be done.
Does 25 years in the end help or hurt, even if you're looking at this in a historical or other context for other investigations?
Well, I've often said, and I think it's a truism, that when you're talking about masterpieces that are stolen, highly valuable, highly recognizable works, they're either recovered right away because somebody talks or what have you, or they're recovered a generation later. So contrary to what many people believe, I think the time that's passed helps us in certain respects, in major respects. The scariest people involved might have died off, or wives become ex-wives, that old saying. Of course, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that when a quarter of a century passes, people die, and it's a little more difficult to get accurate recollections and such. And that's where the hard work comes in. Talking to everyone we possibly can talk to, getting the point out about our reward, enticing people to come to us, working with our partners. So I really do believe we're in a good position. I don't think that we're hindered by the fact that so much time has passed.
You just talked about the metaphor of being in the end zone. How much did the publicity generated by the last major push by you and the FBI help get you there?
I think the last push, 2013, I think you're referring to, helped us in the sense that it let the public know, first of all, that we're making advances, that we're working very hard. We wouldn't have gotten there if we weren't. So I think people feel that if they give us information, that we're utilizing it. The other way that I think it helped us was to hone down on the sorts of leads we're getting and the sorts of calls. Throughout my tenure here, and I can speak for the FBI as well, we've received thousands of tips from people. Obviously, some much more helpful than others. Since the press conference, the ones that have come in have been more, I'd say, direct or targeted towards what we are looking for. And knowing what we know, we're able to weed out less than useful leads from ones that need immediate action. But let me be clear, every lead we've ever received, without exception, is followed up upon.
On an average day, middle of summer, not nearing the anniversary or anywhere else, how many calls do you get?
On a day, I'll probably get a call and perhaps an email or two. So I get a lot. And sometimes the repeat calls are not all new pieces of information, but I also get letters in the mail. So I'd say on a weekly basis, I probably get 8 or 10 contacts from people.
How confident are you that the objects will be returned?
I have the utmost confidence that we'll get the paintings back. First, I'd say, and being frank, if I didn't have that confidence, I'd be the wrong person in this position. I have absolute faith that the paintings are still intact, that we're on the right track, and that we will recover them. I really believe that people watching this broadcast will one day see these paintings in their frames again.
I know you can't say why, but why do you believe they'll be back?
Well, I can say that because there's so much hard work put into this. I can tell you that there's nothing that should be done that is not being done. And we're constantly exploring new avenues. I mean, the museum, even just this year, has undertaken this effort to be a little more public about the theft. I think you'll see that the museum has released this virtual tour on the internet. It's an amazing piece of work, and it even gets into how we acquired the pieces. And I'm learning even today, after 10 years of obsessing on this. So we're always looking for new avenues by which we can recover these. Nobody is resting on their laurels or sitting back waiting for a phone call. And it's that type of effort by the FBI, the best minds at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and us here at the museum. I think those things together make it inevitable that we'll get in the end zone.
You are obsessed.
Sure.
Why?
I think it's impossible not to be obsessed. I remember when I first began here, I was interested. And on my first day, I walked around the museum and took in these empty frames, read about the paintings, read about Anne Hawley, talked to her at great length. And that leads you to become totally enraptured by what needs to be replaced here. If you read about Mrs. Gardner's legacy, what she created here, her intent, how she left it for the education enjoyment of the public forever, I would feel derelict in ever giving up the hunt for these things. They belong to the people. They belong where Mrs. Gardner put them. And you can't walk through this museum even once. I challenge anyone without becoming obsessed with these need to be back.
You know, I still walk into that gallery and get a knot in the pit of my stomach. Do you have a similar physical feeling? I mean, how does it manifest itself in you?
I have to parse my words because I don't want people to think I'm crazy, but I often will go into the galleries at night and sit there in the dark and picture what it was like the night the theft happened, lights off, lights on. I have countless pictures of the empty frames from every angle. Sure, it's obsessive for me, but I would say if you were a homicide detective, and I've said this before, and you know how they put the chalk outline around the body, and then the body's moved, and the photos are taken, and then the chalk outline goes away. Here we have the frames, and they're there forever. It's a constant reminder to me that there's a job to be done. And at the same time, though, it's a constant message to the public that we're going to get them back, and we haven't forgotten them.
And finally, I think a lot of people, even I have wondered at certain times, how the FBI remains so invested financially, with manpower. The world has changed dramatically in the last 25 years. There was the entire search for Whitey Bulger, the Boston Marathon bombings, a lot to distract from the search for these paintings.
Well, the FBI has separate units, of course, too, and Major Theft Unit works on this one. And, of course, the agents from that unit sometimes help with terrorism, et cetera. But I think it's a testament to how committed they are to seeing the paintings come back, that they've never wavered. They've never pulled agents off the case.
In all these 25 years?
In all these 25 years. My whole time here, I've worked with Agent Jeff Kelly and speak to him literally every single day, 7 days a week, talking about these paintings, sending pictures to each other back and forth of the art. The FBI, they're smart guys and women, and they understand the value of these paintings to not just Boston, but to the world. And they see this as a black mark in our city that needs to be rectified, and that's why they're so committed. I've had the special agent in charge here. He's toured the museum to see the crime scene, and Carmen Ortiz, the U.S. attorney, comes here often, walks the museum, talks to me about the investigation, expresses her commitment. The other day I was in her office, and when I walked out, in front of me, she has, across from her door, the missing paintings on the wall. That shows you how important these are to people. They understand the gravity of these paintings and the importance of the museum to the world.